Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. And today we have Dr. Jaspreet Jain with us as our Researcher Celebrity. A brief intro of Jaspreet. She has done his bachelor's from SBS PGI Dehradun. And then for master's, she did her master's from Terry Institute from New Delhi and super specialization in bioinformatics. And between the PhD and the masters, she went for DRDO. She also got BIREC grant and worked at Dabur. Then she finally decided that she wanted to be a PhD, and for which she registered herself at Amity University Noida, but worked at International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, New Delhi. Following which, she was awarded big grant, and for that she worked at KIIT Bhubaneswar, following which moved to Canada at Montreal Clinical Research Institute for the postdoctoral fellowship, and presently she's at McGill University as a researcher and doing COVID-19 immunity task force work. Welcome, Jaspreet, and thank you for taking time out.
Hello, thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, so our traditional task question is like, how and when you decided that you want to be a researcher?
That's an interesting question because my journey started when I was in school, where in the 11th, 12th standard, you have to do the project. And when everybody was like trying to build circuits or doing something, I was in the biotechnology lab, taking the different kind of soaps and soiling the coins and then trying to see on a culture dish how much of those soaps are able to get rid of the bacteria from the soil. So
Mm-hmm.
that what I did in the school itself. And I was
Wow.
never fascinated by being a doctor because I have an uncle who once told me when I was very young, and I now know that it did made an impact on my mind, was that he told me that a doctor prescribes the medicines that have already been researched on. A
Mm-hmm.
researcher finds new medication and experimental technologies or experimental medicines that are used on a later point of time by the doctors to save life. So I wanted to be on that back end of things, trying to come up with new drugs, come up with new technologies that could be used after. And it got me more fascinated because as and more I learned about the field, I started with the plant biotechnology because I just wanted to learn all the things that you could do in a lab. But then I got fascinated with the viruses, like how a small organism can just create havoc. And you know this with the COVID-19. Funnily enough, that my family never knew what I used to do. And when COVID-19 hit, I told my family, like, this is what I do for a living, okay? Taking care that virus like this never spreads. So that's what got me fascinated and entered into the field of biotechnology.
That was a deep thought from a student at school ages, because I still remember mine and so many other researchers sharing this experience that even after registering for PhD, they were not sure that they wanted to be a researcher. But early in your school days, you were so sure that you want to be a researcher. And that was a very great, uh, I think the way to look at that, not a doctor, but a researcher to go back and do all the research. So, with this brain thought, when you decided that you really want to pursue research as a career, for which you have to uh, walk through PhD and your postdoctoral training, how was this journey? If you can share that with us.
I have had a very checkered journey. I was never sure what I wanted to do. What motivated me to get into research was curiosity, was the dynamicity of the field that you could learn something new every time, and the fact that it is not monotonous. What scares me the most is monotony of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I always was like, okay, let's start with. So I was hit with a family tragedy, for which I had to actually be there for my aunt in Dehradun. So I was like, okay, let's join an institute in Dehradun and did my bachelor's in chemistry, biotechnology, zoology, with some specialization in biotechnology. I was a very minor part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I told you like earlier as well that I wanted to do everything. So
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, okay, what should I do next? Should I go into life sciences? And then I came across the Terry School of Advanced Studies and I joined plant biotechnology. There was a very fascinating and very empowering experience for me because all the researchers and the teachers that we had there, they were all young and very motivated researchers. They introduced us to the field of research papers and reading research papers, analyzing the information right from there. If it wasn't for that, I think I would have flunked my master's very badly because I was never into learning from the books and never into learning in the traditional way of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, this is fascinating, but I should be, because as you know, bioinformatics is a field that go hand in hand with any kind of research. You need to know some sort of bioinformatics to be able to be a good researcher because it starts with in silico to in vitro to ex vivo.
Mm-hmm.
So, and or in vivo, as you could say, ex cellular in vivo. So I started with learning the in silico techniques. Then I joined the Dabur Research Organization as a BIRAG grant awardee. And
Mm-hmm.
then I learned how the contract-based organizations work, how the cell cultures work, how the mammalian cultures work. And then I joined ICGB as a research or as a project fellow, as a research project fellow with Dr. Sujata Sunil. And she actually gave me a free rein.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, okay, do whatever you want to do, but make sure that it makes sense. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that it has basis of what you're doing. And I used to get very frustrated during my PhD. Like, why am I doing so much work? Why am I leaving it sick? But then I realized it's because my boss or the PI that I worked with gave me a free rein and she gave me the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So although the journey has not been with the most seasoned researchers, it has been with some of the most motivated and most inspiring researchers. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say the credit for my ingenuity or me thinking outside of the box goes to Dr. Sujata Sunil because she gave me that opportunity to grow myself as a researcher. And then I worked as a big grant awardee with Dr. Sujata, trying to find different ways of like getting from bed to the bedside and trying to do diagnostic therapies and therapeutics basically
Mm-hmm.
during for chikungunya and dengue as such. And then when I decided to move ahead in my career, I joined IRCM
Mm-hmm.
with Dr. Eric Cohen. Although it was a challenging experience, but it really taught me to work with the animal models. Although it started in the PhD, but I got more in-depth knowledge about working in the animal models, working on the HIV side of things,
Mm-hmm.
and working on the cancer side of things. And then the pandemic hit, working on the COVID side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, I'm working with the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force and looking at a different aspect of being a researcher, looking at the knowledge translation side,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the study liaisoning side between the funding agency and the researchers. So it's been very checkered, but I think it's been very fascinating, I would say.
So when you see yourself doing research on wet lab and doing some in silico studies on the computer, and when now, as you said, presently you are with the policy and government and all that part. So which part do you feel as a researcher that you enjoy the most?
I think what I enjoy the most is amalgamation of everything.
Mm-hmm.
For me, as I said before, monotony is something that I really hate in my life. I don't like when things are very plateaued and there are no
Mm-hmm.
ups and downs in life. I know it's very stupid and maybe cliche to say,
Mm-hmm.
but whenever things get too comfortable, I get worried.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I'm not progressing in life because it's getting too comfortable. So I would say I try to make sure that I look at everything. Like even if when I'm working with the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force,
Mm-hmm.
I collaborated with the data team and
Mm-hmm.
we came up with this paper where we're looking at the samples from the samples from different like provinces in Canada and coming up with the seroprevalence in the pre-Omicron and the Omicron era. So I just keep myself busy with everything that I can get my hands on and
Mm-hmm.
trying to learn new things.
So as a researcher, Jaspreet is someone who just want to try everything. Is it like, if I have to describe it that way, will you be happy with that?
I would say Jasprit is someone who's curious.
Okay, okay, nice way. So when the curiosity was a thought behind you joining as a PhD student, and then during your postdoctoral research, and now the role of that curiosity, if I ask, that has gone down or is increasing since then?
It has evolved, I would say. I would not say it has gone down or
Mm-hmm.
increased, but I think it has evolved. When I
Mm-hmm.
was a PhD student, I wanted to learn new things, how
Mm-hmm.
the things are working. I wanted to know the bench side of it. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be the best at it as best as I could be. I know that I'm not the best. There are many people who are far much better than I am, but I just wanted to be the best version of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started my postdoc, I started running independently. So the independence was also there during my PhD, but I still had to rely a lot on if whatever I'm thinking, is it correct or not?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever my ideas are those feasible or not? So I was always like, you were in the same lab, and we have had so many discussions during my PhD as well, like, sir, is it correct that I'm doing this, or should I do this or not this? And so that was the part of this curiosity when I was in PhD. And postdoc, it evolved as I wanted to run my own project. So I was given this very fascinating molecule called SMAC mimetics,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at if they could reduce the HIV reservoir or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started to learn how I would run my project. What are the
Mm-hmm.
things that I would do to make sure that it is a good preclinical study?
Mm-hmm.
Then at the same time, I collaborated with a lot of industrial partners as well
Mm-hmm.
to during the HIV part and also during the COVID part. So that's there, it evolved in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I'm working on the project side of things, like the KT side of it, it evolved like how best I would make sure that my research is understandable by the public. What
Absolutely.
kind of data is important to be shared with the public in real time?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm trying to learn project management, the risk associated with the projects, the cost benefit analysis side of things, how to manage a team. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say it has evolved as I transition through my career.
Nice. That's a brilliant way to put the words in the most senseful sentence. So when we see most of the scientists who are brilliant researchers, but they somehow struggle to communicate their research to a layman, or probably just even among peers. Some of them really have that real struggle to converse or to convey their message which they want to do. And now in your case, a researcher actually is moving out, doing this thing, as you said, that sharing the real-time data, working with policies and the public and all that. So how do you see among your peers that researchers do really have this problem when they want to convey their research to someone else?
That's a very interesting question. So even when I'm working on the KT side of it, we have this research series called uh, CITF Research Synthesis, and we have the webinars. And we work with the PIs, not just the researchers in terms of the early career researchers, but also the late career researchers. And we get the presentations from them. It's all scientific, it's all very clinical, it's all very results heavy. And what we always say to them is, this is what I learned from my comms team. So I work with Caroline Finuff,
Mm-hmm.
and she's the comms manager that I work with, and Todd. So they
Mm-hmm.
basically told me that the best way to put forward your research is that when you in the word you have this way of writing where you say the high school level, middle school level, or no PhD level and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Your So the easiest way to make sure that you are able to convey your message to the masses is to be in the middle school and high school level,
Okay.
because some things that are very common to us, for example, if I say flojo,
Mm-hmm.
you know what flojo is,
Mm-hmm.
but what's the importance of it to the other person or to the lay person? And even for the policymakers, they are they are really interested in the big picture of things. So one should focus on the big picture of things when it comes to communication.
Yeah. So when you were saying that even the serious senior researchers, when they present, have you seen this? I will say the struggle, that word, that what they are doing, they are well aware of it and they are masters of it. But when they have to, uh, you know, talk to someone else, like per se, if there is a policy which needs to be changed on the basis of a results of a researcher, how that goes hand in hand, or what are the issues? Because if I got it right, that your present uh, profile is something which has to do the bridging between that.
Correct. So it's mostly between making sure whatever the research results we are getting, we convey it to the policymakers in a way that the policies could be outlined around it for the best possible outcome for the general public.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. So when we talk about most of the non-research part, it is still people can understand that part. But when we, as in researcher, everyone has their own journey. You made it so swift that people feel like there was no struggle in there. So if we can take a step back and uh, talk about some real struggles which you have faced at different stages of your career.
Oh, there have been many. So first of all, during my PhD, because I hardly had any friends during my PhD, but some people were really kind enough to take the I would say the bad attitude and be good friends to me as well. Because when you are during your PhD, you're always trying to find new things. You get frustrated when the things don't work. Apart from that, there are many times that you miss family gatherings, that you miss your family time. You're not able to participate in a lot of social activities as well. Then, but it's still fun because at the end of the day, you still have a few people to fall back onto, to bitch about, like, about everything on a cup of tea maybe. And you have been one of those as well. And we have sat together, had tea, and like bitched about a lot of, like, I will not say bitch, but I've like complained about a lot of stuff that have not been going great. At the same time, when you move outside, you learn that it was still better during PhD because you were answering to somebody. They were still someone who was responsible for the work that you were doing. But then as a postdoc, when you get more independence, you understand that you have to be more flexible. You have to be more adaptable to the changes. You have to be more, I would say, forthcoming to the challenges that might come. And when I moved countries, it was also this cultural shock. And my problem has always been that I call spade a spade, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes you have to make sure that you use the right words, not to offend people. And again, you also have to make sure that you set your own priorities. What are your priorities? That has to come first.
Yes.
At the same time, you should learn to say no from a very early age.
Absolutely.
That I learned that from very tough life lessons. But yeah, when you learn to say no, you save yourself from a lot of trauma that can happen during your early career phases when you're doing your postdoc, when you're trying to transition into something new. At the same time, you have to be open to conversations with people. You should not always be in the lab. That's what my problem was. I was always in the lab doing whatever I knew was best for me, like working on the bench. And that I thought at that time was best for me, which was a hoax, which was completely wrong. So I would say that you should be able to communicate with people outside of academia. And you should be able to communicate with people maybe who are just out fresher from college because they have such good ideas. And I learned that when I was mentoring an university student, that she taught me that it's important to go out and have conversations and look at the other opportunities as well.
Nice. So this brings us to two main points I would like to share with all our audience also, that saying no is very important and you have to clearly mark your boundaries, that what you can do, what you are willing to do, and what you're ready to sacrifice also. Sacrifice, as Jaspreet said, it can be family gatherings, it can be some important functions, but again, you have to prioritize them, that when you want to stay back and do your experiments. Otherwise, when you stop your experiments, go out, enjoy your family time, because at the end of the day, you are a human being and you do need that contentness, that happiness. If some people get that in the lab, sure, go for it. But if you feel you are stuck, then take a break, go out and enjoy your time. That was saying no. Second, keeping yourself open, having a conversation with real human beings, not only with the lab equipments. Okay, go out, do converse with them, because what we believe at Researcher Celebrities, like, conversation is the key. And that is one of the reasons why we are having this conversation with Dr. Jaspreet Jain today. This month, we are celebrating women in STEM, and young researchers like Jaspreet brings this amalgamation, as she said, from all the different, she gives you the perspective, being in academics, in industry, in policymaker, on the wet lab bench, doing in silico, developing pipelines for in silico studies of bioinformatics. So once you have this mature researcher, then the challenges also changes. And now let's hear about the challenge uh, which comes for a mature researcher. So Jaspreet, when you were a PhD student, that time the struggle was different. Now, when you see yourself at the current stage, how those challenges has evolved with you being evolved as a researcher?
So now, because I've become very picky in what I do, I have prioritized my own self and my own specific needs over others. I'm The challenge is finding the right fit,
Mm-hmm.
finding the right place which has the right kind of environment, work culture, and the expertise that is required. And then for that, the challenge is knowing people. Getting
Mm-hmm.
outside of the academia requires you to know people outside of academia. And I'm in Canada, which is, so this is a place, it's not like US. You don't have a lot of startups, and you do have startups, but they're not many. And also because I'm in Montreal, the other challenge is the language.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be open to adapt. You have been open to make sure that you are getting the right kind of contacts
Mm-hmm.
and you're building long-term relationships with those contacts. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge, because as you know, every person, every researcher, be it academia, be it company, be it industry, whatever, they would tell you collaboration and is the key.
Mm-hmm.
And for that collaboration, you need to have contacts
Yes.
and long-standing relationships with people and with the employers, with your teammates, because you never know who is going where.
Yes. So keeping everything alive, because what we know is most of the researchers, most of them are very, you know, they enjoy just having a cup of tea with their colleagues, taking that time out between the experiments. So I see that every researcher is very full of life. They grab every opportunity which comes to their way so that they can enjoy their life outside the lab also, because lab is a 24/7 work. How I see that research is like 24/7. It's always goes in your head and hand. Obviously, when you are in the lab, you are doing things just with the hands, but when you're outside the lab, then the experiments are going in your head. Over the conversation over coffee comes, sometimes brings a new experiment that, hey, okay, that was not working, now I know why it is not working, because we had this conversation. So although you are not on the bench, but your mind is still in there. So do you want to share any such experience which happened with you when you were not in the lab, or spending some family time discussing with friends who does not even know what science you are doing, as you said, and then you came up with something like that?
I have been very good at compartmentalizing my brain, and I prioritize the things that are in front of me. So
Mhm.
although I do think about my experiments outside of the lab, I have not made them my life.
Oh, nice.
And if if something is not working, I would go back and make sure that I do everything. For one thing that I do have always done in my life is have controls at every point of time. So I could
Yes.
always go back to the controls and see which has worked and which stages have not worked. So
Mm-hmm.
I never take this thing outside of the lab that I'm still thinking about stuff. I'm still doing it, but I'm not made them my priority. So I would not be the best person to answer to that question, I would say.
No, but that itself is such a how we see and what we do in our conversation is like at the end of the conversation we always ask about the words of wisdom from our researchers at different stages. But what you said actually is the word of wisdom, that if you can compartmentalize your brain in a way that you share only where you want to discuss it, but you can actually keep them in your background and not in your foreground. And because that is what most of the researchers, especially in India, what we struggle is like if something is not working, family can easily understand that, okay, this researcher, being a boy or a girl, that they are going through a tough phase, seems like nothing is working in the lab because they carry everything with them, which
Mhm.
is mostly a human behavior, which can be evolved, as Jaspreet said. So you can be an evolved researcher at early age of your career and not take all of that to the home or to your friends. So that is something commendable. So Jaspreet, we are talking about friends and families. If I ask you that what are the role your friends and family played you being a great researcher?
I think I owe them the whole credit of that. It started, we always say behind every successful man, there's a woman. I would say behind every successful and strong woman, there are multiple men. My dad, who has always like given me a free rein, do whatever you want. He would pick me up at 12, even at midnight from the lab if I had to stay in the lab. He was always very open to that.
Mm-hmm.
Then my brother, who's like, he is my best pal, and my sister as well. In that terms, I could discuss anything with them, and they were just very calmly. And they're very younger to me. They're like 7 and 9 years younger to me, but
Mm-hmm.
they would very calmly listen to all the torturous thing that I would tell them that are not working or I'm struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
Then my husband, who has never said, "Oh, why don't you stop doing it if it's not working?" He's like, "Oh, it's okay. If it doesn't work, it'll work tomorrow. Maybe
Nice.
you missed an experiment. Maybe you missed a control." He's not into science, but he keeps reminding me, "Do you have the controls?" Because he also know that you need to have control.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes my friend. So I have been blessed with some amazing friends. They're not many, but I have a few and they're really amazing. And even though we don't speak every day,
Mm-hmm.
I owe to them that I could talk to them at any point of time that I want in my life, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's about an experiment or whether it's about something that I'm struggling with inside or outside of the lab.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say you should surround yourself with good people.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be the whole village, but even a few handful of people can be your whole village.
Nice. Absolutely. So, taking one step deep, when people discuss about their families, their friends, they talk about they were very supportive, but doing research and things are not working. It is impossible that you are not frustrated. And were there any time when you were a PhD student or even after that, that you really thought of giving up on research?
Many times. I joined the policy and industrial side of things because I don't want to go back to bench.
Mm-hmm.
Academia, I think, needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
I think academia needs to evolve with the evolving needs of the researchers as well. Because
Yes.
right now, there are many things that you can do outside of the laboratory. When you PhD is not a degree. PhD is a lifestyle choice
Yes.
because you're choosing to do research. And if you have that attitude of researching or some thinking outside of the box, you can apply it to anywhere. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a thought process that you take with you forward. So for me, even if I have to buy a car, I would do research. I would make a flow chart. I would make comparison charts. I would do like, oh, comparing this to this, this is a gold standard. So as I said, it's a lifestyle choice. Knowing that, I think academia has to evolve. It has to understand that now we are not doing it because we don't have a choice. We're doing it because that is our choice.
Yes. That was, I think for me at least, it was enlightening. And I believe that our audience can also agree with this part, that PhD is not a degree. I always said that. But how I used to say that was like PhD is a training. But now you have taken it to next level. PhD is lifestyle something, some
It's
lifestyle
it's a
choice.
lifestyle choice, yeah.
Choice. Wow. That absolutely. Now I think from now onwards, I will always quote your name, saying that Dr. Jasprit Jain once said that PhD is a lifestyle choice, not a degree. Great. So your research we have talked about a little bit. We have talked about a little bit of the struggles. What are the thoughts with evolved researcher, which you said that presently you are and you are still evolving? Are there something which you want to suggest to the researchers in our community that who are thinking, considering going for a PhD? Because you mentioned briefly about the role of your mentor for your PhD lab. When you chose the lab, what are the things which a, a researcher, if they are considering to pursue PhD, they should consider before joining a lab?
So I would first say that I joined Dr. Sujata knowing that she would not be able to give me a PhD from ICG.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that. So what I think the most important thing is you have to discuss things and your choices with or your what do you want to do in your future with
Mm-hmm.
your PI, and you should be very open and honest about it. Also, at the same time, funding is important. So
Yes.
if your PI is even new, you don't have to be in a well-established lab. You can start with a young PI and make sure that you help them to help you. If
Yes.
you do good work, they would progress. And when they would progress, you would progress with them.
True.
And that has happened in my case as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, you have also worked with Dr. Sujata. We started with like 3 senior people in the lab, not even, I would not say the senior, but it was me, Jatin sir, and Dubey sir.
Mm-hmm.
And she trusted us and we put our trust in her as well.
Yes.
Like, okay, if there was some issue with the funding, we would get it. It's fine. If
Yes.
there was an issue with us not getting the money, we would get it. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But we would always be honest about the experiments. Even if it failed, we never made it feel like, oh, it failed because we don't have the resources. You have to be resourceful. That's a part
Absolutely.
of PhD training.
True.
So when you join, you have to make sure that you have a good rapport, a good relationship with your mentor, even if or he is a young person. Some
Mm-hmm.
people choose by gender. They say women are not a very good PI or they are not very good coaches. I don't understand the role of gender in this because at the end of the day, we all have evolved brains and
Yes.
everybody has the similar capacity of thinking about stuff.
Yes.
And being with the women PI, she actually understood when I had some struggles. She actually understood when I needed some time off with my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why this discrimination is in Indian society, but I think that's all falls in your brain and in your head. We are
Absolutely.
And the other thing is that if it's lack of funding, you have to step up. You have to make sure that you can come up with newer ideas of the projects that can get more funding in the lab.
Yes.
It's you have to take it as your lab, not it's Dr. XYZ's lab.
Mm-hmm. No, I
So
think this is very mature coming from so early in your stage, like early career of stage, because people do talk about fundings once they are starting their lab. But being a PhD student, bringing the grants in to support you and PI co-evolution of, like, people talk about host parasite interaction and host pathogen interaction, but when you say that the co-evolution of two researchers also need to be in thought. So here I would like to take a pause and tell all our audience that you should always be open for this frame of reference. You have to keep open that it's not just somebody's responsibility to get you through the PhD. It was you. You have to own that it is your own responsibility, or at least that share of that responsibility which you are ready that, okay, you are doing experiments. Yes, you are doing it for the results you want to publish in your thesis, but there is something more which you can do to yourself as well as for the betterment of the lab. So thanks, Jaspreet, for bringing this perspective to us.
And I also think it's a great opportunity for the PhD students as well to learn how to get funds.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we are almost at the verge of our conversation, and you also pointed out something, because here the conversation with you is part of the celebration of women in STEM in India, and Indian researchers doing research in India, or Indian researchers flourishing everywhere around the world. What have been known scientifically that women's are better in compartmentalizing things, and you are a live example of this. You already shared your part of compartmentalizing your experiments in your head, but not mixing it with anything else. We feel that, we believe that, and we are celebrating women research on this. Although, like, there was a discussion between in our group that the number of women researchers in India is, the young researchers are a lot, like women are coming up with more power, more aggression. But we had Dr. Sujata also in this series, and few of their words were like mind-blowing. She never felt that she's competing with anyone else. She never thought that gender biased. So that is something which we can hear in your conversation also, and you have a strong note on it. We just want to request to all the researchers around the world, at least if you have to remove one thought from your brain, just remove this gender biasness. Because as Jaspreet said, we all have evolved brain. So let's just put our brains to research. Let's make the world a beautiful place to work, a healthy place towards what we are working on. So Jaspreet, now we have the last question for you. After this conversation and a research of more over a decade now, do you feel a research celebrity?
No, I don't. To be honest, I don't, because every time I take the new step in my life, I always have this identity crisis, I would say, and I have this imposter syndrome that maybe I'm not good. I still have so much to learn because there's so many people who are so much better at their job than I am. And it could be because I keep changing my fields, or it could also be because there still is a lot to learn anyways.
Yes.
So I don't think I would ever feel that way, because I I don't know why, but I always have the fear of missing out on opportunities. That's why I just keep hustling.
Okay. So Jaspreet, you have gave us so many perspectives today in this conversation. Lifestyle change, lifestyle choice, PhD, that is one of them. I will quote this forever. Let me suggest you something. So here at Researcher Celebrities, what we do is we celebrate every researcher. So now, do you agree that you are a researcher celebrity?
Yes, I think every researcher should be celebrated for whatever they add to the knowledge, to the
Exactly.
community.
Thank
And
you
also,
very much.
like,
Yeah,
research is an addiction, so
absolutely.
keep being addicted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And at the end of the conversation, audience, you have seen, she gave us so many perspectives. She just accepted that she is a researcher at Empowering Science Foundation. That is what we believe in, that every single researcher is a celebrity for us, and we celebrate their research on this platform. Now, I would like to ask you all that if you have any question or if you want to stay in contact with Dr. Jaspreet Jain, you can either directly write to her or you can write to us at Researcher Celebrity or Empowering Science Foundation, and we will put you in contact with her. And then, as you have seen, the seasoning of her as a researcher, that evolution that will help you, please feel free to contact us or contact her directly. Here, we will say thank you, Jaspreet, and good luck for your future.
That's my pleasure, Raja sir, and it has been a pleasure. We have known each other for very long, but it was really good to connect with you again. And I always call everybody like I know from before as sir and ma'am, because that's what we have groomed up with. I know it's not the best practice, and people do say you should not say this because it just creates hierarchy, but I think it just creates a sense of belongingness to a community where you are a senior, and I have always learned from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you, Jaspreet.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.